What's up? My name's Pip, and today we're going to be looking at 25 new cards from Modern Horizons 3 that should fit into most any deck without breaking the bank. I know premium sets can be quite pricey, so I'm here to help you make the best use of the commons, uncommons, and what I'm guessing are going to be bulk rares. Most of these cards are versatile utility tools that can find a home in almost any deck they're allowed in.
It's budget brews live, pal Pip, so settle down and take a sip. It's central viewing if you're budget brewing. Your opponent's gonna holler and you'll save yourself some dollars. So come on down and get yourself a steal.
Woo! Let's dive in! Let's kick it off with Grim Servant. This is 3 colorless and a black for a 3/2 menace. And when it enters the battlefield, you're going to search your library for a card with mana value less than or equal to your devotion to black. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then you lose 3 life. Obviously, in mono black, this is very powerful and adds another tutor to the mix, which I generally don't like playing, but they are good cards in Commander. The 2 restrictions on this card, paying 3 life and only being able to find things up to your black devotion, don't really hinder this card all that much, even in a multicolored deck, provided this is going to end up being a very cheap option for a tutor effect. But over time, I could see this card going up in value, so I would grab them when the set is coming out. No Elemental Blast. So for a generic mana, you're going to be able to choose one. Counter target multicolored spell, or destroy target multicolored permanent. You should be able to work this into most any deck that is playing mana rocks that create generic mana, or by adding a couple lands that also generate generic mana. Having the ability to counter or destroy a permanent in any color deck is very, very powerful. And I would recommend finding ways to fit this in most decks, provided it doesn't really mess up your mana base. Evolution Witness. 3 mana, 2/1, adapt 2 for a green and a colorless. Adapt means if this creature has no 1/1 counters on it, you can pay that cost and you put 2 1/1 counters on it. So you only get to do that once, making it a 4/3. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put onto Evolution Witness, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. In a Hardened Scales or +1/+1 counter deck, this card's going to end up being really powerful in the late game as a tool to get the cards back from your graveyard that have been dealt with already. And I can't imagine it selling for more than like 10 cents after the set's been released. Dog Umbra. 2 mana, flash aura. As long as another player controls enchanted creature, it can't attack or block. It's a pacifism effect at instant speed, or Dog Umbra has Umbra Armor. And if you're not familiar with Umbra Armor, it's basically a get out of jail free card for a creature. The first time it would be destroyed, you remove the aura instead. So you can use this to flash in and save a creature, or use it to flash in and pacify a creature. This is going to fill 2 card slots in a white deck with 1 card, which is really, really useful. Collective Resistance. 2 mana, escalate green. Escalate means you can pay this cost for each mode chosen beyond the first. So for 2 mana, you get to do one of these, and for 4 mana, you get to do all 3 of them. Destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, target creature gains hexproof, and indestructible until end of turn. Again, this is going to fill multiple slots with 1 card in your deck. It's going to double as protection for a creature, and removal for artifact and enchantments. Possibly both at the same time. And it's an uncommon, so it's going to be very cheap. Argent Deus. This is a rare, but I imagine it's going to end up being bulk. There's been no speculation on the price of this yet as I'm making this video, but I can't imagine it's going to be worth more than a couple dollars at most. White and a colorless for an artifact. Enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it, and whenever 2 or more creatures attack, you get to put an oil counter on Argent Deus. So each turn, you could potentially add another counter to it. You're going to pay 2 colorless and tap it and remove 2 oil counters. Exile another target non-land permanent. Its controller draws 2 cards. This card is repeatable removal, which is very, very powerful. It does have the downside of drawing your opponent 2 cards, or the upside of you trading anything in to draw 2 cards. I think this is going to fit in just about any deck playing white that needs some removal and is trying to go wide. Alright, I'm going to hit pause real quick just to ask you to smash that like and subscribe button. Looking at the data over on my supercomputer, I can see that only 1% of you nerds who watch my videos are subscribed. Now, I'm gonna have to sell my kidneys if I don't get about, 32% of you guys to subscribe to my channel. Alright, back to the video. Raven Charm. 1 white and a colorless. Choose 1. It deals equal damage to twice the number of creatures you control to a creature, so some spot removal if you have a wide board. Destroy target enchantment, or exile any number of target players' graveyards. and this is at instant speed. This one card is going to fill 3 roles in your deck. Spot removal, destroying an enchantment, or dealing with anyone who's doing graveyard recursion. This is a nice little Swiss Army knife in a can. Reckless Pyro Surfer. A red and a colorless for a 2/2 haste, landfall. Reckless Pyro Surfer gains Battle Cry until end of turn. If you're unfamiliar with Battle Cry, what it means is that when this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and you can stack instances of Battle Cry on a single creature. Which means if you have 4 or 5 lands enter play in a turn, all of your other attacking creatures are going to get +4 or +5/0 until end of turn. I think this card can easily find a home in some of the green-red landfall decks that already exist, and can become absolutely disgusting with fetch lands, or Splendid Reclamation, or any of these other cards that bring a bunch of lands from your graveyard back into play. Plus, it's an uncommon. I'm a huge fan of these dual-faced land/spell cards. They allow you to run more lands in your deck while also increasing the number of spells that are in your deck at the same time. Most of the effects on these cards are not cards you would really want to play in your deck if that's all it did, but having these options make them very useful tools for consistency. I've added a bunch of these to this list, so I'm just going to go through those now. What's really nice about the ones in this set is that they have dual land versions in addition to the single color ones too. Waterlogged Teaching. So for 3 and a blue or a black, you're going to search your library for an instant card or a card with flash. Reveal it and put it into your hand. This is at instant speed, so you can do this at the end of an opponent's turn, or obviously you could just play the land if you need it. All of these are dual lands that enter the battlefield tapped, so I guess I'll flip them over for you to see, but nothing new on the other side. Revitalizing Rebound. So for a green or a black, you're putting a 1/1 counter on target creature, and then it gains indestructible till end of turn. This might be one of the better ones, because you want to run this kind of effect anyway in most decks, and it's allowing you to fill 2 slots with 1 card. The other side is Old Growth Grove. Strength of the Harvest. 2 and a green or a white for an aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each creature and or enchantment you control. This one, I feel like, fits into less decks and only really wants to go in any type of Enchantress deck, but for that type of deck, this card is very, very good, because it's already running a number of these types of effects, and you can just replace a land with one of these to add another effect without cutting down on your land count. The other side is Haven of the Harvest. I like the art on this one. Stump Stomp. Colorless and a green or a red. This is another one of the really powerful, versatile ones. Target creature you control deals its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. So this is a removal spell in a color that generally doesn't have great removal spells. And obviously, it's a land. Burn Willow Clearing. Blood-Soaked Insight. This is a pretty pricey one, unless you get some good cost reduction on it. 5 and Rakdos or Rakdos. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. This thing can get pretty cheap if you have drain triggers off of any of your other cards, or you're playing any type of aggressive deck. Once you cast it, target opponent exiles the top 3 cards of their library, and then until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. If you cast a spell this way, you can use any type of mana. This is more of a desperation play card, but having the option in most decks that are either draining or trying to be aggressive would be pretty nice for a late game card. The other side is Sanguine Morass. Legion Leadership. Colorless and Boros. Until end of turn, double target creature's power and it gains first strike. Again, an effect that you probably wouldn't play, but having the option to finish somebody off or win a combat is pretty nice. The other side is Legion Stronghold. The Last Swing Grace. 3 and Hybrid Orzhov or Orzhov. This is an aura, an enchanted creature gets +2/+2, has flying, and lifelink. Again, a card you wouldn't play in most decks, but having the option is pretty nice if you need to gain some health, or get some evasion and finish somebody off. Or just have a flying blocker. Age-Graced Chapel is the other side. Now, we're going to get into some of the single color ones. I didn't do all the double color ones. Some of them are a lot more specific and involve energy, so I don't think they're great for a list like this. Razorgrass Ambush. So for a white and a colorless, we're getting an instant that deals 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This is a spell you wouldn't want to play normally. Having an extra removal spell that's also a land is probably a pretty good idea in most decks. With these single color ones, they have a little bit different text on the other side. They enter the battlefield tapped usually, or you can pay 3 life to have it enter untapped. 3 life in Commander is not as much life as it is in 60 card formats, but 3 life on these is not as steep of a cost as it normally would be. I can see myself using both of these modes pretty equally. which makes it a very nice option. Sundering Eruption, 2 colorless and a red. Sorcery, destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Creatures without flying can't block this turn. So this one's actually pretty nice. It's going to do 2 things for us. It's going to be able to destroy a pesky utility land that one of our opponents is using, or lock them out of a color if it seems like they're stuck. And it's going to make sure that most of our creatures are getting through in combat this turn, which means we could take out someone's land and kill somebody with our creatures at the same time. Some great targets for this land destruction are Maze of Ith, Field of the Dead, Rogue's Passage, things like that. The other side is Volcanic Fissure, which is another one of the 3 life or enter tapped lands. Fell the Profane, 2 black and 2 colorless for an instant that destroys target creature or planeswalker. Not a great on-rate removal spell, but having an extra removal spell that doubles as a land, like I've said before, is pretty awesome. The other side is Fellmire, Disciple of Freyalise. Hope I said that right. Freyalise? I don't know. Whatever. 6 mana, 3 colorless, and 3 green, which is a pretty steep price, and I don't know if you're going to be able to play this in many non-mono green decks or very heavy green decks, but when Disciple of Freyalise enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. This is more of a desperation play later in the game, in case you need to gain some life or draw some cards to dig for an answer for something. But having the option on the land, good. The other side is Garden of Freyalise. Bridgeworks Battle. 2 colorless and a green, target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. It fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Removal spell and a land in 1 card. What's not to love? Tanglespan Bridgeworks is the other side on this one. Marionette Apprentice, black and a colorless for a 1/2 Fabricate 1. Fabricate says when this creature enters the battlefield, you can either put a 1/1 counter on it, or create a 1/1 colorless Servo Artifact creature token. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. This is going to fit really nice into some of the black decks that are good at generating treasure tokens, or some of the decks that have an Aristocrats theme. Having another thing that drains as a trigger at 2 mana is a really nice utility for these decks. Plus it spots you an extra artifact to get you started. It that heralds the end. Generic and a colorless for a 2/2 Eldrazi Drone. Colorless spells you cast with mana value 7 or greater cost 1 less to cast, and other colorless creatures you control get +1/+1. This card doesn't fit into a ton of decks, but any deck that's running a bunch of artifact creatures, or some big old Eldrazi's, or big colorless spells, would love to have this card early on its curve, where it probably has a little more trouble finding things to cast. Imskier Iron Eater, 6 colorless, and a black and a red. Affinity for artifacts, affinity if you don't know what that means. This spell costs 1 less for each artifact you control, so you can get this down to 2 mana pretty easily in the right deck. When it enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is half the number of artifacts you control, rounded down. And then you can pay a red and 3 colorless to sacrifice an artifact, and then it deals damage equal to the sacrificed artifact's mana value to any target. I don't know how good this card's going to be. Since it's a rare, it could actually end up being a little pricey. I've heard talk that Affinity might be coming back in Modern. I don't know if it's going to be in these colors, but we'll see. At this point, I can't imagine it's going to be that expensive though. I think this card would make an excellent commander, or fit into a black-red or Grixis style Affinity deck. Drawing all those cards and having a sack outlet to finish people off with your big artifacts is a very powerful finisher. Being able to reduce the mana cost on this and the commander tax on this later in the game is going to be very powerful, and is going to make it really easy for you to recuperate after a board wipe, or if people are ganging up on you. Arna Kennerud, I don't know, whatever. Sky Captain, Esper mana and 2 to cast for a 4/4 flying lifelink human knight. With ward, discard a card. That is a beautiful ward cost. Whenever a modified creature you control attacks, double the number of each kind of counter on it. Then, for each non-token permanent attached to it, create a token that's a copy of that permanent attached to that creature. This thing is begging to be the commander in an auras or equipment deck in these colors, and it's going to give you so much value. Plus, it has flying and lifelink, so you should be able to stabilize really easily. When you're playing this, I think you're going to want to find the right combination of auras and equipments to really synergize with it, particularly ones that have good enter the battlefield effects, or generate tokens, or do something like the 4 Mirrodin effects I think are going to be really good with this one, or auras that come into play and draw you cards. Obviously, I think this is going to be a really cool stable commander going forward, and I think a lot of people are going to try and build this deck. I know I'm going to put together a video on this after the set comes out, so stay tuned for that. Right now, this card's pre-selling for about $10, which isn't super cheap, but I'd imagine it might go down. A lot of these 3-color commanders that aren't really great in non-commander play generally tank in price after the set comes out. And last, and maybe least, Metastatic Evangel. This is a 2-mana 3/1 Phyrexian human cleric. The creature types here might end up being relevant. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you proliferate. There are a number of different decks you can build around this. What comes to mind quickly? Hardened Scales, Poison deck, anything that wants to put rad counters on people, or experience counters, anything like that. This card would fit in a deck that's trying to do a number of those things, or any one of those specifically. So for 2 mana, being able to just slam this down and then go about the rest of your turn, getting a couple proliferate triggers is really, really nice. So that's 25 cards from the new set that I think could fit into most commander decks that are playing those colors. I know it's not an exhaustive list, and I know I was really gushing over those lands, but let me know in the comments what cards you're excited about from MH3. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, subscribe, do any of those things, or all of them, and I'll see you in the next one.